I ask you to just kind of briefly introduce yourself and talk about what you're working on, you get to define what work means to you.
Oh gosh, where do I start? My day-to-day work, the thing that earns money and brings in an income for me, is I'm a freelance copywriter and content writer for financial firms. And so all of my clients are either large RIAs, which are wealth management firms with many advisors that they work with. I also work with banks and then wealth tech companies. So companies that have usually software as a service for, financial advisors. So I'm kind of in that ecosystem, in that sphere. And I got into it just because prior to this, I had about 8 or 9 years in financial services. I was licensed with my Series 6 and 63 and my life insurance license, and decided that I needed to go into something that was a little bit more flexible. Because obviously, as a financial advisor, you constantly have meetings with clients, and they all want to meet in, when it's convenient for them, which is late in the day, early evenings, that sort of thing. And that's just not conducive to having a young family. And so I decided to kind of pivot and go into content writing, which is actually marketing had been my first career before financial services. And so decided to get into that and focus on the financial world as my niche just because I had been in it. And so it seemed like a good fit for me. So right now, all of my work is, it's all over the board in terms of what kinds of projects I work on. I work on everything from content, so like blog posts, magazine articles, newsletters, to some copy, although I'm not as strong at copy. I don't love it as much as I do content. But I do some email marketing, some website copy, very limited. I'm trying to get away from those projects right now, just because I don't love them. And so I'm trying to not take projects that I don't love at this point in my career. And then I also do some operational work, and that's really for my clients who are, they're helping advisors run their business. And so it's more like operational how-to guides, how to use a tool, how to, here's a form that needs to be filled out by your clients. And I write those and I edit them for my clients. And so that's kind of, my work is kind of all over the place in terms of what I do, but I'm very consistent with who I do it for. So that's kind of how I've niche my business down. So that's my day-to-day income work, but I'd say probably the bulk of my day-to-day is taken up with family responsibilities. And that's why I freelance, is because of my family. I have two teenagers who are 17 and 15. And I always told myself when they were little that when they became teenagers, I was going to have all this free time in my life and all this time to focus on things. And that's true to an extent. Like, I do have a little bit more time in my day, but they still need me just as much for decision making and just being around to talk to when they need me. And so the bulk of my time outside of writing is focusing on my family and helping them. We also have, my husband and I also have both sets of parents here and near us. And so, they're getting older. They're still pretty independent, but they're getting older, and I can see a time when they're going to need more help from us coming up. And then also I have my 90-year-old grandma is also close by. And so I also try to help out where I can with her. But so for me, the freelance life has really enabled me to focus on the family life. And that's kind of why we've chosen to go this route, is because my husband and I sat down one day and we looked at it and we said, we really need one of us to have flexibility in our day-to-days. And he's an electrician and he works for a large commercial electrical contractor, and he really didn't have that capability to have a flexible lifestyle. And so we decided together that I probably had the skill set to go flexible. And so that's kind of what we decided. And I've been doing it since 2017. So that's what I'm working on these days. I would say, a really good mix of work and family. And I also have some commitments of time that I give to my church and to community organizations. And that's where I'm really putting my efforts and my energy today.
That's amazing. So full, so many things that you're doing. One thing that I wish was talked about a little bit more when people talked about freelancing was all of the unpaid operational tasks involved. So I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. All of the freelancing work that has nothing to do with sitting down and writing for clients, but finding clients, discovery calls, How do you manage that? Are you at a point in your career where you're getting enough inbound that it's not taking as much time away, or do you have any insights on how to navigate that side of things?
Yeah, and that is such a struggle because I think until you sit down and really track your time, you can't really know how much time you are spending on those unpaid tasks. So I think for a lot of freelancers, what I recommend starting out, even if you're not charging hourly, I think it's still good to track your time on everything that touches your business, because then not only do you have an idea of where your time is going, you also can. It also makes it easier for you to quote projects later, because you know exactly how, you don't know exactly, but you have a better ballpark figure of how long a project might take you. So I'm a big fan of time tracking, especially when you're starting out, just to see where all your time is going and make sure you're not, spending too little time, because a lot of times freelancers are like, why am I not bringing in the income? Well, if you track your time and discover you're only spending 5 hours a day at your desk or whatever, it's a kind of an eye opener of where you need to be and how much time you need to be spending on billable income. The other thing I do to really try to reduce non-billable time is I have made it a point to only bring on a handful of clients and only have a handful of clients at a time. I don't want to be the person who has 100 clients, because that becomes an administrative nightmare. You're spending all your time managing personalities, sending invoices, tracking, onboarding people, and that is a lot more admin work. I have purposely sought out clients who have the capability of giving me recurring work, who I see as possible long-term clients, and people who I can really get to know their business, because it makes it easier for me to context switch back and forth. If I'm working on client A in the morning, client B in the afternoon, I already know their personalities. I already know their voice. I already know kind of what they're looking for. It takes a lot less time for me to shift back and forth between their projects. If you have, 100 clients, you're constantly context switching, constantly trying to remember, okay, what's their style? Like, what's their voice? Do they use the Oxford comma or not? That sort of thing. And so for me, keeping my client roster small has really helped manage that administrative work a lot more efficiently.
I was speaking to a freelancing friend one time, also a writer, and she said something along the lines of, well, if you think of writing as a kind of acting, which it can be, and
Mm-hmm.
I sort of believe that it is, it does feel like I'm stepping into a personality when I start working on a project for a client. She said, you don't see many actors doing like 10 roles at once, right? Like not in the same week, not in the same day. They dive in, they do their role consistently, and then they take a couple of months off and they do something else. Now, acting is different for 1,000 different reasons, but it was an interesting shift. I wasn't tracking or paying enough attention to the time it takes to go from one voice to the next voice. There's a lot of talk about task switching in
Mm-hmm.
freelance or in work in general. But in my mind, for a long time, I thought, well, writing is all one task, writing is writing. And it's not. Even if your clients are in the same industry, even if they feel very similar, if you're doing it right, there's going to be nuances.
And I think it's hard when you're trying to run a business by yourself and you're also trying to parent. That task switching is constant, whether you're switching between clients or you're switching between family and work life. That's something that has been hard for me to overcome, is that frustration around, okay, I want 2 hours to work, but I only have an hour because I've got a family commitment or family demand. And so I think that when I make sure that I'm using my time efficiently, and putting those processes in place that help me run my business efficiently, I'm less frustrated with the interruptions that come from non-work things. A lot of us as copywriters and content writers, we don't look at our business operations enough and say, okay, where can I make this more efficient? Where can I reduce frustration, for myself or for my clients or for my family? So I think that is one thing that I would really provide advice for, is be constantly looking at your processes and how you can refine them and how you can make them better, not only for you, but also, for the people around you.
Do you see yourself as an agency? Do you feel compelled to bring on writers under you or to scale in that way?
It's funny that you asked that because I have felt compelled like every 6 months or so. I look at that route and I think, so in my view, everything in life is based on what's beneficial for you and for your family at this moment in time, right? And so I think a lot of us get locked into this. We have to make a decision, and it's going to be have to be for long term, and we don't think about, well, I can change things up in 6 months or a year or 2 years based on what my needs and my goals are right then. I have kicked around the idea of an agency and I haven't ruled it out, but for me, I am much happier just managing myself at this point versus having to manage a team or having to, delegate stuff out. One of the things I'm working on for myself is I'm a little bit of a type A control person. And so I won't say control freak, but control person. And that's hard for me to have to sit down and wrap my brain around, outsourcing some things or building an agency. And right now in my life, I'm very content with just being a solo business owner. And so I'm not saying that it won't change in, a little bit. It might, but at this moment in time, I'm content with where I'm at.
I feel very similar. It feels to me sometimes in copywriting circles or freelancing circles like that is step two. That's the goal that you have to get to, that you need to get to. And I've been trying to examine that because there's freelancing itself, in my opinion, is still unconventional. And I started this because of a willingness to be unconventional and to go about things that made sense for my life. So then to get to that like great position and then pressure myself into doing this sort of new traditional route doesn't make any sense. But I still feel that pressure, and I have to kind of check and go, well, where else can you kind of pour that ambitious energy?
Absolutely. And you know what? I think too, I've also kicked around the idea every now and then. I kick around the idea of going back to work full time somewhere. And for me, it always comes back to, what do I value more? Do I value, being part of a full-time team, or do I value a consistent paycheck, or do I value flexibility and the opportunity to be completely 100% in charge of my day-to-day and captain of my own destiny? And for me, it always comes down to option B. I want to be captain of my own destiny. But I think too, if you're constantly asking yourself that question of where do I want to be, and do I want to be an agency or do I want to be a freelance writer? A lot of times I write down my pros and cons list and then I put it in a drawer. And so if that little, bug kind of starts scratching away at me again, oh, I should look at doing an agency, or I should go back to full time, I pull out my list and I remind myself of why I'm doing freelance work, especially on, hard days. If I've had a sticky conflict with a client or something that, hasn't been the most ideal freelance day, a lot of times I'll revisit that list and remind myself of why I am doing this and why I'm freelance. I find it helps.
Yeah, I love that. I think understanding your values is helpful. And then maybe sometimes stress testing those values. If you're really feeling called, you can always walk back a decision. Usually you can walk back a decision anyway.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that I keep telling, so my 17-year-old, she's a high school junior. We've started looking at colleges, and she's feeling a little pressure, to make a decision about where to go and what to study. And I told her, I said, everything is changeable. You don't have to feel pressured to stay somewhere if it's not a good fit, or stay in a program that doesn't feel like a good fit, or you discover that there's something better, or different that you want to study later on. And I realized as I was telling her that I need to tell myself that too. Everything is changeable. You can make a decision that puts you on a different course or on a different path. And so I think you're smart to, be exploring the opportunity of an agency and kind of what that holds for you, because that sounds interesting to you. And it sounds like that's, a direction of something that you would want to try.
When you decided that you wanted to focus on content writing, did you feel any nervousness or trepidation? And if you did you have any mentors or books that you read, guides that you purchased, groups that you joined that helped open up the idea to you and soothe some of those concerns?
Sure. As far as the work itself, I've never been nervous about it or anything like that. So my first career, my degree was in organizational communications, my bachelor's degree, and then I have a master's degree in business. And so I've always felt very comfortable in like the solo business world, or, small businesses, that sort of area. And my first career right out of college was in marketing communications. And so I've always, my entire life, been a writer. And that first career was, really the early days of content writing. I started my career in 1998, and so that was like, just as websites were getting going. In fact, I created the first websites for a couple of my early jobs, and so I've been around for a little bit, and I started freelance writing kind of on the side in 2002. And but again, it was still a very different landscape of what I was writing. It was mostly print, and it was mostly like newsletters and magazine articles and actual print publications that got into people's hands. And so I've kind of evolved as freelance writing has evolved as well. So my biggest nervousness when I went full-time freelance was figuring out if I could actually run the business side. And that for me has been, I enjoy it. I enjoy running the business side of things, managing my money and, working with clients. And I enjoy the other side outside of writing. But, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I didn't know that, there was a whole world out there that you could do, like content strategy and content development, more marketing development type of things. I didn't even think about that when I got started. And as I kind of progressed and I wanted to build my business, and I didn't want to be just churning out blog posts, for 4 cents a word or whatever. That's not how I wanted to build a business. And so one of the places that's been very beneficial for me is the Facebook group, the Freelance Content Marketing Writer. That Facebook group has been very beneficial in terms of seeing what's possible and hearing the stories of what people are bringing in on a monthly basis, and giving me ideas for different ways that I can run my business more efficiently. And also ways I can level up, and services I can add to my business and that sort of thing. So if somebody out there is looking for ideas for ways that they can add to their business services or their offerings, I would really recommend getting into a Facebook group, or there's LinkedIn groups, but I don't think they're as active, and just reading through some of the posts, because a lot of those people have the same exact questions and are thinking about the same things that you are. And that to me has been probably the most beneficial to my business. I also, earlier this year in January, I started I don't want to call it a mastermind because it's not really, it's called the Financial Writers Circle. And it's a small group where there's about 11 of us in the group we all write in the financial niche. And so we're all kind of different in our approach. Some of them write for online publications like Forbes and Kiplinger and that sort of thing. There's a couple like me who work more with direct clients like banks and financial advisors. But we're all kind of at the same level of our journey and our careers, and making, about similar incomes, and so grappling with some of the similar issues. And so we meet twice a month for an hour, and we just basically talk about industry news, about hot topics that are kind of keep coming up in Facebook groups or whatever. It's a place for people to ask questions, and we kind of do a little bit of a hot seat thing where you can come bring a challenge that you're facing, and we'll try to group think it. The other thing that we do is we also keep each other accountable on our goals. Every quarter we sit down and talk about, okay, how did the previous quarter go, and what are your goals for the upcoming 12 weeks? So that to me that's just been in place for 5 months now. And that has been so beneficial for me to just be able to sit down and talk with my peers. And it's given me reassurance that others out there feel the same way I do on a lot of things, because you can talk to your family or to your friends or to whomever that's not in the freelance world or in a solo business ownership kind of place, and they don't always get what you're trying to do, and they don't always understand the challenges that you face. But I think when you get into a peer-to-peer group like that, it gives you a sense of community, and it helps you have a sounding board and have a place where you can bounce ideas off of. So that has been probably, even 8 years into full-time freelance, that has been one of the most beneficial things I've done and I've experienced.
I love that. I did something similar to help with my own freelancing and ambition. And as much as it's helpful to have somebody to talk to about the challenges that I'm facing, what I found really, I was sort of surprised at how much I benefited from this, but it was the ability to brag a little bit, or to share the wins, or to be able to say, I had a month where I did X number and that number sounds really impressive, but because they also do similar work, they understand that not, that's the revenue, not all of that I get to actually keep. Uh, I also get to complain about how burnt out I felt about that. I also sort of wonder if because I'm a woman, it feels a little bit different. I think a lot about jealousy. I think a lot about competition. I worry a lot about these things. Also about, like growing up, I had a lot of messaging that ambition was sort of unflattering and you should cover that up. You should hide that up. You should go, be quiet with that sort of like eagerness, I suppose. So finding a group that I can get help with, that I can talk to with is really nice. But it's also amazing to say, I did this amazing thing or I overcame a personal hurdle and somebody else not only is happy and supportive of that, but it actually helps them. They're like, great, now I can do that same thing in a similar way. I love speaking to somebody that has more success than I do in all the different ways that one can be successful. They figured out the work-life balance thing this month, or they've hit their new income goal. And then I'm like, oh, wonderful. Now I believe that I can also do that.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because I think, especially as women, we don't talk up our successes as much as we should. And it feels uncomfortable, I think, especially for me being a Midwesterner, it's very uncomfortable to brag upon myself, right? And so I think when you do have a safe space like that where you can share the wins and have people around you that understand why it's a win, even, I mean, sometimes I'll tell my husband about, oh, this was really great today, but he doesn't understand. Okay, well, great, Amy, but why was that great? He doesn't always get why I'm so excited about it or, why it's a win. And so for me to surround myself with other people kind of at the same level, doing something very similar to what I do, it does give you that safe space to share and be vulnerable. And I think that's what a lot of times we're missing when we're working at home, even if you're a full-time free remote worker or, even if you're solo, it's hard to connect with others and feel that sense of community. So I think it's great that you felt like you had a place to share your wins. That's definitely important.
Yeah, I think one thing I really like about copywriting versus some of the other freelancing work that I've done in the past, like project management and almost entrepreneurial circles as well, is that it feels with copywriting, and I would love to hear your take on this, but I feel a general sense of openness and willing to share and willing to help, unlike pretty much every other industry that I've worked in. I don't know if it's because we're all sort of thinking like there's so much content, like there's so much that could be written, that the competition isn't really as high. I mean, I know that there are a lot of copywriters, but once you're really confident in what you're doing and you kind of, I think, see the value in your specific perspective and experience, it doesn't feel to me like there is as much competition as other people sort of, that you worry about when you're first starting out. And because of that, I find that people are very open with their operations, how they do things, their processes, their templates, how they pitch, working with clients, their advice, even when it comes to like the actual content you're writing. I find that people are really willing to go like, this is how I would handle that headline, or this is how I format, or this is what I've learned about SEO. And I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but when I was working in project management, it didn't feel that way. Um, I don't hear the same sort of stories from like graphic designers that I work with. I don't know. I was wondering if that has been your experience or if maybe I've just sort of lucked out in the groups that I've found.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think that's been my experience as well of people are just very generous with their knowledge and their experiences and their time. And one of the things that I caution a lot of new freelancers, especially, is if you read those things and if you get advice from other experienced freelancers, feel free to pick and choose what works for you, right? Not every piece of advice is going to apply to your life and your business because everybody comes at it from a different angle, from different life experiences, different personal situations. So I always caution people, hey, this is what worked for me. That's what I try to lead everything off with, because I hate when people give advice that are like, you should, or, always or never, because that's just not how it works. Everybody can build their own freelance business based on what they want it to look like. And I think from the perspective of sharing your knowledge and sharing your business and gatekeeping, there's so many clients out there, and as writers, we can only work with so many clients at a time. And I think when you approach the whole content writing, copywriting, freelance work from an abundance perspective, I think you're much more willing to share with other people and help them develop their businesses, because there's enough work and enough content and enough types of projects to go around. And so that's why I share as much as I can with other people, is because I know that there's plenty of work for everyone. And so, I don't see the content writing world as I don't see other writers as competition so much as collaborators.
I think in order to do any sort of freelancing, there has to be a certain level of openness and curiosity and ability and willingness to go in and test things out. I see people say never use Upwork or only use Upwork, and I'm like, the answer is probably in the middle, or
Right.
it is uncomfortable, but you're going to have to get used to just learn by doing and rolling with the punches and figuring out where your strengths are.
Absolutely. And there is no template, and there is no formula for, getting clients or for how you work with clients. And I think that's one of the things that's most overwhelming, especially for new business owners, is that there is so much stuff that you have to kind of trial and error and figure out what works for you. I see a lot of people that say never work at an hourly rate. And I'm like, well, you know what? If somebody's willing to pay me 150 to 200 bucks an hour to work you bet I'm going to work at an hourly rate. And, I think sometimes it's easier for us to experiment when we feel like we have a little bit of a safety net. I mean, big companies experiment all the time. They experiment with new products or services, but they have that safety net, right? They have their ongoing revenue, and they're millions or billions of dollars in the bank that they can fall back on if their experiment goes wrong. And I think for solo business owners or very small business owners, we don't feel that freedom to experiment because we don't feel like we have that safety net, whether that's income or the padding to feel like we failed at something. Well, you know what? We're going to at some time. And so what I advise a lot of freelancers to do is put as much money back and save, like you said, that you dip into your savings when those months are a little bit leaner. But not only does it allow you to do that if clients pull back or if your work drops off a little bit, but it also gives you a little bit of emotional safety net and to feel like, okay, I can try something different, or I can go a different direction in my business. It does provide you with that level of emotional support that you need to experiment and try new things.
I love that. It also reminds me of I used to do this thing where I would write down and make my goals for the month, and then I would sort of plan how many clients I could work or how many hours I thought I could devote to work. And after a couple of months of realizing that I almost always overbooked myself, I went in and I would write, you have to budget for sad days,
Right.
which not necessarily every day that I don't work is a sad day, but it's this kind of reminder of like you are going to have unexpected things come up, whether that is like your kid is sick and you're driving them, or your neighbor needs help, or you get sick, or you are like sad, or you're burnt out, or your brain needs to be recharged. And so I have that as like a little mantra in my head because it sounds a little bit ridiculous, and yet it is going to happen. I'm not a machine, and I will never, it's never like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And I don't think it's like that for anyone. Even if you're at a traditional job or workplace, there are definitely days where you're like not there and you're kind of clicking your keyboard. But I had to really remember that for myself and then plan accordingly. Okay, I have a question about your business chats because we're talking about community and strategy, and then you offer this like really great gift. So could you talk a little bit about them?
Yeah, it's something that I just kind of officially started a few months ago, but I've kind of unofficially been doing it for a long time. So we talked earlier about sharing experience and knowledge and that sort of thing. And I feel very blessed to be in a position where I've been freelancing for over 20 years now. And I have, experienced the gamut of, stuff with clients and I've tried out a lot of different operational tools. So I feel like I have a lot of knowledge to share, but I don't really want to be, I haven't gone the direction of doing like official coaching or anything like that. But I really love having conversations like this one where we're just talking shop. And I feel like a lot of times as solo business owners, it can be very lonely. And we can have a tendency to crawl into our own heads and we get stuck because we can't see any other perspectives. And so what I started doing was a few months ago, I started offering these just 30-minute business chats, and they're totally free. And you can just get on my calendar and schedule a time to talk. And it can be about whatever you want to talk about. And I really just offer my time up and myself up as a sounding board for other freelancers to talk through. Maybe they're having a challenge getting clients, maybe they're having a challenge leveling up to the next level, or keeping clients, or how do I manage my finances as a business owner, that sort of thing. And we just talk for 30 minutes and I just provide an outsider's perspective, because I think when you get in your own head and you get stuck, it's really hard to see any other options or opportunities. And I recently had a conversation with a new freelance content writer. She was trying to figure out her niche. And I'm like, okay, so what's your experience? What's your background? What do you know about? And from there, we were able to nail down 3 or 4 potential niches for her. And so that's just really what it's all about. It's just me providing a listening ear and then giving my perspective.
It's very common to have a mentor when you're working in corporate or you're working in person, and that's just part of the community. You're all in an office together. People get mentors, you learn from each other. And when we are isolated and working remotely, there's less of an opportunity for that. So I love this idea of of providing this service for others. And I can imagine how rewarding that is for you. One of my favorite ways to get advice is to give advice. Often I think when we're giving somebody advice or we're giving them strategy or we're helping them work out their own problems, at least for me in the back of my head, I'm also solving my own hiccups. And that's like one of the best things about having these conversations. We really can mirror and reflect back to each other, even if we're at different stages. So I have to imagine that you're getting, insights that you can then use for other clients or for your own business, or, maybe you don't even know where those insights are going to lead you, but eventually a conversation that you had 8 months ago is going to come back and really be of value.
And I think too, one of the biggest things I try to do in those conversations is I try to be honest and realistic with people. I think that there's been a real disservice to out there, that there's this misconception that starting a solo business, especially as a content writer or copywriter, is easy and is a quick way to start making money. And so I try to really help people temper their expectations, and not only of their business, but also of themselves. I want to be realistic with people and say, okay, you've never written anything ever before, but now you want to start a freelance business. There's a big gap here that we have to create a bridge for first. What if you instead pivot 90 degrees and do something that's related to what you're already doing, instead of trying to do a full 180? Because it's much easier to pivot 90 degrees than it is to do a full 180. So I recently talked to somebody who, they have a lot of admin experience and, operational experience. I'm like, well, instead of trying to jump into freelance content writing, why don't you look at doing, virtual admin type of stuff instead? And they had never even considered it as an option. And so I think that's where that whole, outside perspective comes into play. Is sometimes people can see our strengths and our skills and how we can put them to use better than we can. And that's really what I offer with these chats is how can I help you build a business that is a fit for you, not for what you think you should be doing.
There's this idea that you need to be very passionate about the things that you're writing about. I think especially with the term writer, it can be very sort of lofty, and a lot of people lump artistry in with writing, even if it's business writing. So I guess my first question is a little bit cheeky, because would you consider, financial writing your passion? And then depending on that answer, what do you find meaningful about it?
Quite honestly, I'm not passionate about it. I know a lot about it, and I know, I know kind of what to look for and how to write for compliance purposes and for a lay audience, that sort of thing. And part of the reason why I'm not passionate about it is because I'm pretty disconnected from the end user as a writer, because I'm the first stop in the process, right? And so I write the copy, and then it goes on to design, and then it goes to whoever the end audience is. And I don't always know the results or the outcome of that content. And a lot of times I don't even see the final version of it because it's, an internal document or whatever. And so I'm a little disconnected from seeing it make an impact in the end. And it's hard to be passionate about it when you don't see the impact that it's having on people. I will say though, from writing about finances, I think is super important just because there's so much lack of knowledge out there about how to manage your money, how to grow your money, how to protect your money. And so I know that I'm doing something that's very beneficial for people. But I just don't always see the final outcome or impact of it. So it's hard to be super passionate about it when you don't see it. But I think for me, I think a lot of times I just have to remember that, we've kind of gotten into this trap of work always has to be your passion, or, it has to be something that really fills your soul. And sometimes work is the thing that makes it possible to do what we're passionate about. And, I write in this space because I saw an opportunity, and, there's not a lot of people with my financial experience and writing skills. And so I kind of fill a hole there. But I also see it as a way to shore up my life, to do the work that's meaningful to me, to serve my family, to serve my community, to do the things that in my outside work life that really fill me up. And so it's hard because you want to be passionate about what you're writing, but some days it's just work. And so I think even when you're passionate about it, I think some days it's just work. But for me, the financial writing has really just been more of a means to an end rather than the end itself. And someday I might pivot and I might write about something different, but and find something that is really the end in itself. But for now, it's what helps me provide financially for my family and help support my family financially. But it also provides me the time to have that balance to support my family in so many other ways.
I've been talking to some friends recently, and instead of thinking about the content being your passion, what I think is more important really is that you respect the content that you're writing. I don't think you can be a good copywriter or content writer if you don't take the work seriously, if you don't see its value. It's hard to fake that, and also it'd be just a very miserable experience to fake that. So you should
Mm-hmm.
respect it, but I don't think that you have to be obsessed with it. I do think it's helpful to be to see it as a tool, and I love that. I love removing some of that pressure from, like, I love travel, I have to write about travel and make money from the travel writing. My suggestion would be write about travel if you want to write about travel. Make money in the ways that you can make money. And one of the benefits of volunteering or doing work for free, like your business chats, and not exchanging money, is that it keeps it loose in a way, or playful or open, or it reduces some of that pressure. So when everything is a potential source of income or money, I think that people find themselves being really rigid, and you might actually, you might end up really disliking your poetry or your travel writing, or some of those things that could be more free and more open when you're trying to squeeze as much money out of every single thing. It's a little bit of a trap, I think, business owners and freelancers sometimes find themselves in.
And I have struggled with, over the past few years, I've noticed that I haven't done a great job, and I'm trying to do a better job of carving out time for my passion projects, my passion writing projects. I used to write poetry and short stories and stuff all the time, and I've been working on a novel, but sometimes at the end of the day, I've used up so many words for clients, I've forgotten to save some for myself. And so one thing I've started doing is marking off time on my calendar every single day for my passion projects, for working on my novel, because I really want to get it. It's time for it to, get out of my head and get out and free up the brain space. And it seems silly that I have to mark time on my calendar to work on something that I'm really passionate about and really want to do. But if I don't make it a priority, I'll let everything else take priority over it. And so, I think anytime that you have something that you're passionate about, put it on your calendar and make sure that you guard that time jealously, because I have a tendency of letting other things kind of creep into something that's just for me. And, I think a lot of creatives probably fight that same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And much in the same way that we talked about having peer groups for our copywriting and our business aims, I also have a once a month check-in call with a couple of creative writers. And that call is all about like what is the progress on your book? What is the progress on your poetry? Sometimes I have nothing. It's like, well, I didn't do anything. But even having that call and hearing that other people are tending to it, that in itself feels like I'm tending. And of course, as you mentioned in the beginning, we have different seasons of our lives.
Absolutely. 100% agree.